what you need to know is this piece takes place after my dad got custody of my little sister and I, and we went from having 4 television channels, which broadcasted such shows as Walker, Texas Ranger, and Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
Yes, Jane Seymour!
Saved by the Bell. To having no television channels because my dad's house was nestled in the hills and lots of Amish. So we did have access to my stepmom's Catholic-friendly VHS collection. All right.
Catholics.
On Sundays, Margaret, my stepmom, packed my toddler brother and the infant twins into her Ford Escort for Mass with her family 2 hours away. Dad, who was still calling himself a recovering Catholic then, spent his Sundays making fence or working on his maple syrup operation. In other words, on Sunday, Zenda, my little sister, and I had the house to ourselves. Naturally, we used this time to engage in illicit activities. It just so happened that for us, this meant interpretive dance. And our stepmom's VHS of the Kingdom Chums original Top 10. The Top 10 was an animated feature that attempted to teach about the 10 Commandments through catchy tunes, performed by a sweater-wearing lion and an African-American tiger named Marvelous Mose. Admittedly, 2 sisters watching the Kingdom Chums might not at first seem like a particularly shameful enterprise. Enter interpretive dance. When the coast was clear, Zenda and I twirled, crouched down, popped up, grew into trees, mowed the lawn, raised our arms and flapped like birds. Plus, in addition, in this blended family of agnostic dad and Catholic stepmom, Zenda and I had planted ourselves firmly on Team Agnostic. We joined Dad in not saying blessings before mealtimes, in abstaining from 2-hour drives to Mass. If Dad saw what we did with the chums, he would see that we were traitors. Perhaps worse, if Margaret saw us, she would know that we were not, in fact, diametrically opposed to everything she stood for. We couldn't let her see this chink in our armor. The Kingdom Chums starts with a sweater-vested boy named Petey and a pigtailed girl named Annie, testing each other on Top 10 trivia. They sit in a local diner with a sign advertising malts on the window. Petey is flipping through the miniature jukebox at the end of their booth when a boy built like a linebacker appears. Petey gasps, "Osborne." "Move over, shrimp," Osborne says as he slides into the booth and flashes a record. "I borrowed it from the record library." Petey gives Osborne a sidelong glance. "For how long?" "Doesn't matter," Osborne says. "It's mine." Annie's jaw drops. She pulls a stuffed lion from her bag. "Hear that, Christopher?" she says. "Osborne broke one of the original Top 10. Osborne leans over the table. "Do you mean the very first Top 10? I'd kill to have that in my record collection." Annie cowers briefly, then gets out another stuffed animal, a tiger. "Marvelous Mose says the Kingdom Chums would be glad to help you find them," she says. The lion flickers briefly with an aura of white light. Christopher says all you have to do is follow the love light. At mention of said light, 3 rainbows shoot out of the tabletop jukebox and undulate toward the children. "What's going on?" Osborne says as a rainbow wraps around him like a cobra. "We're on our way to meet the Kingdom Chums," Annie says, lifting her arms to make room for her rainbow snake. The twinkling sound. Annie, Petey, and Osborne transform into clouds of stardust. They are then sucked by their rainbows into the jukebox. Whether the jukebox is a portal or actually contains the pastoral land they enter is unclear. Either way, once safely on the other side, the children rematerialize in human form. They float above their rainbow while a woman sings, following the love light. Let the love light lead. Zenda and I's dance to Following the Love Light looked like that moment in 90s rock concerts when the band slows things down and the crowd gets out their lighters. A rainbow road, we sang as we waved our arms back and forth. A multicolored highway. My song sneaking did not stop with the Kingdom Chums. I rode my bike the half-mile to Sunset Road and pretended the gravel over the creek was a stage. I belted to the swallows in the haymow. Singing, I was not the girl whose stepmom called her downstairs to point out that she had once again neglected to sweep under the table. I was not the girl who could not meet her stepmom's gaze or get the words to come out when she said, "See all that dirt you missed?" I was a nun, raising my arms to the sky. I had confidence in sunshine. I had never cried into my precious moment's pillowcase. After Margaret had said, "You gonna answer me?" I had never said, "I hate you." I had never been asked, "What did you say?" or mumbled, "Nothing." I was a newsie, selling papes by day and dreaming of Santa Fe by night. When Mrs. Stockton cast out the song From a Distance in music class, I took to learning it with fervor. I stood in front of my orange plastic chair and attempted to land on each note with the grace of Nancy Kerrigan. From a distance, I sang, "The world looks blue and green, and the snow-capped mountains white." When Mrs. Stockton told us to march in place for the song about being instruments in a common band, I pressed my lips together in concentration to stay on the beat. I became obsessed with From a Distance. Sang it every chance I got, on car rides, walking to the bus stop, sweeping dirt from under the kitchen table. The chorus, "God is watching us from a distance," gave me pause when I thought about it too hard. Was this distant place on another planet? Or on some pink clouds that floated in space? The song works better when I let the distance be a point in time. The world would be blue and green. There would be no hungry mouths to feed. And I was helping this outcome along. If I sang "No hungry mouths to feed" with enough passion, the wish would become part of the air. One Friday after school, Dad dropped my sister and me off at my grandparents' for the night. We would help them with the milking. Then we'd wash the manure, smell from our bodies, and eat spaghetti. Grandma would make popcorn with butter, and we'd watch the movie they'd rented from the grocery store. When we opened the door to their basement, Grandma was already in her old t-shirt and rubber boots. She greeted us with a coffee-stained smile and a hug to her soft middle, and sent us to change into our barn clothes. Zenda and I knew to climb the rusted metal fence that shut the cows in their pasture. We knew that if we waited at the top of the fence, Grandpa would grab us underneath the armpits and swing us down. We knew to yell, "Come, boss!" and that the cows would come running down the path, hungry for grain and heavy with milk. We kept on yelling after we saw the first brown-headed Jersey emerge from behind the hill because yelling, "Come, boss!" was fun. "Why do you say, 'Come, boss'?" I'd asked my grandma one night as the cows were crossing the road. Grandma had kept her arms akimbo and her eyes on the herd. "I suppose it's because we wouldn't have a job without them," she'd said. Zenda and I helped clip the cows into their stanchions and split bales of hay into cushion-sized squares. We plated the cement in front of each slobbery nostril with the correct measurements of brewer's grain, corn, and soy pellets. Then we waited for our next assignment. I stood at the front of the barn next to the bags of ground up limestone. Grandma and Grandpa were good about scraping up all the manure that landed in the aisle and depositing it into the gutters behind the stanchions. But no matter how hard you scraped, there was always some brown stuff left on the floor. To soak up this liquid feces, my grandparents used limestone. After milkings, they'd walk down the aisle and toss it out like flower girls. As my grandparents readied the milking machines, I opened a bag. I dug my hand deep into the cold, ground-up stone. I pulled up a handful and let it fall through my fingers. It smelled like basement. I closed my eyes and started to sing. From a distance, there is harmony, and it echoes through the land. Grandma raised her head from behind a cow. Is that a new song? I told her it was a new song. It's really nice, she said, and went back to dipping teats in her blue cup. Her cup of blue disinfectant. I kept singing. God is watching us, I belted. God is watching us from a distance. When I finished, I looked around the barn. Grandma was next onto the next cow, dipping another teat in blue fluid and wiping it off with a scrap of newspaper. Zenda sat at the opposite end of the barn on a bale of hay, making her fingers do a dance on her thigh. Grandpa removed his hat and wiped his brow. The cows continued to swat flies with their tails. One lifted her tail and let loose a stream of urine into the gutter behind her. A moo came from my right. It was Dolly Dogwood, a new addition to the herd, whose milk had scored well in fat content and viscosity. In a moment, Grandpa would turn on the milk machines that sucked the milk from all of the cows into pipes that ran to the big tank in the bulk house. But right then I locked eyes with Dolly Dogwood. She seemed to hold my gaze. Then she opened her mouth, stuck out her long gray tongue, and mooed.